CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. All right, welcome back to CMMS Radio. This guy you see on screen, it's Connor Offutt, and he is the CEO and co-founder of Aetos, and they are building the visual interface for the connected worker. And there's a lot to that. There's some cool stuff. I've seen the solution. I've talked to a bunch of people over there, learning about who they are, what they are. And there's something really interesting about your vision, Connor, that I want to start off with. I don't know if this is too big of a question or not. It doesn't matter. We just roll with it. First of all, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Good to be here, man. I'm excited.
Yeah. So when it comes to Aetos and this visual interface, which I'm fascinated by, not to mention the fact that you guys allow unlimited users. I freaking love that. How is it that part of your vision is that this software could fundamentally change the GDP?
Ooh, that is a big question. Well, I guess I'll say in the beginning, I had no idea. And in the very beginning, what really just stood out to me is I guess I had an instinct that visual matters and it'd be better. And nobody was really putting a visual tool in the hands of boots on the ground workers, technicians, operators, engineers. We have scans for Zillow listings and homes and apartments and digital twins, but I don't know a single engineer whose life has been impacted by a visual interface. And it just seemed wrong. It's like, okay, there's got to be something here. Why hasn't anybody done this? And, there's some value there. So, to answer your question, in the beginning, I had no idea what we were walking into and the size and the space that this could be. But as we started building and put the first set of tooling together, it just kind of hit me. It was like, oh my gosh, this changes everything. We have a phrase here of, reality is the best source of data. And that's really true. There's really no better information source than reality itself. And when you start with that fabric, when you start from the information of reality itself, what that does for data remediation, which then leads to the ability to do better processes. And then that leads to work order management, all the different modules that can exist that are known problems. Garbage in, garbage out, right? And so what if there was a way to actually clean the garbage on input? And that's really what the visual does. And so it's really a new substrate that unlocks these downstream opportunities, which is we're just beginning to realize how impactful this can be.
Yeah, I think, for me, one of the I guess it's a fascinating thing, having been in the industry myself previously and try to maintain this strong connection to it now, whether it's maintenance management or anything related to it. This idea that you guys can come in and literally scan and create that model of what the facility is, what's in it, where it is, move around. You do at least a couple of things. You create this opportunity to really see, track, and manage where something is, not just with the typical placeholders we have in a CMMS or related type of platform, but you have the virtual element where you can actually see, and it becomes nearly tangible. And then that acts as a conduit and an opportunity for at least two things, in my view. One, I could be here and look there, very far away from me, and I could be interacting with someone in that regard as if I were in the space. And what I like about that is someone that's in the know could be working with someone that's still getting familiar with the facility, or maybe learning a technique or a practice on something they're going to do maintenance wise. And that we'll call a more veteran maintenance person could coach up somebody that's still coming into the game. Is that part of why you saw this as a viable technology?
Absolutely. I think my first epiphany was, I was in a big commercial building in New York, and I was hanging out with the chief engineer, and we were going through some of their PMs, kind of trying to overall build a strategy for a more efficient operations. and one of the PMs had some valve that was in a ceiling somewhere, and we spent 30 minutes trying to find this valve. And this was already a team of seasoned guys, been at the building for 10 years, right? And all you get in traditional systems, even the more mobile friendly, robust ones, is effectively a task list that has an asset ID that says, all right, step 4, go to valve LL-5 and then do something there. And that's what you have. Oh, and it's on the 3rd floor and it's on the mezzanine and it's somewhere in this area. Good luck, right?
Yeah.
So how much time is wasted just finding things, right? And it's like, there's gotta be a better way to do this. Like, how much of the time waste is just finding things, and then let alone figuring out whether or not you have the assets across your entire portfolio. How many valves do I have? Well, it's based on the data that I got from Procore or whatever the as-built said from 5 years ago. And since then, there have been 5 changes. How do we know that everything's been updated? It's a basically intractable problem, right? And so, yeah, I mean, all these ideas are bang on. And when you start to shift the paradigm to this visual first narrative, it's like opening Pandora's box, right? It just changes the whole game, not just with the execution like you're talking about, but even on the remediation side, the capture, the maintenance of the data, and the ability to now actually be able to standardize and improve processes across a massive portfolio of facilities. And so, yeah, I mean, it's welcome to the Aetos bug. Once you start seeing it, you can't really unsee it.
Yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it, where you get this extra element, that visual element just adds so many different opportunities for understanding, learning, knowing where we're going, knowing where to look for something. Yep. All those, you could map literally anything, shut off valves, things related to emergencies, all those things. So here's what I'm curious about is, how does the scanning actually happen? Like, is it a physical walk down of the facility? Does it happen in segments? I'm really curious about how that happens, and what role does your client play when you're doing that part of it, like with the onboarding and the scanning and creating this virtual environment. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess I should first preface with the fact that this is barely possible today. Barely. We have gone through hell and high water to even have what we've got today and bring it to reality. I really didn't know if it would even be possible when we started this. Because if you think historically, right, a digital twin is a 5 to 100 gigabyte file that you're never going to run on an edge device with a 3G connection somewhere in the basement, right? You could never stream that type of data. So how could you make that an actual tool that enables the workforce if you're having to sit there for 20 minutes and download a model, right? It's an intractable problem. So the fact that we can even run this on a browser, run this at the edge, is a feat in and of itself. So that's number one. And this has only been possible in the last 3 years. And I think we're about to see an explosion of this technology over the next 3 through the advent of Gaussian splatting. Don't even get me started on that. That's another side tangent. Maybe we can get down at some point.
All right.
But the scanning process itself is pretty straightforward. If you've ever seen like a laser capture lidar camera, it's the same concept. So you're putting a camera that takes 360 images and lidar, and you're moving around step by step. It's the exact same process if you've ever done a home scan or if you've ever done, a commercial real estate listing. It's the same type of process where you're moving 6 feet to 10 feet apart, and at each point you're stitching the scan together. It needs to be contiguous, right? So you can't start in one place and then go to the other place. So you're kind of mapping the territory as you go, and you're collecting all this data. And once you're done, you upload that to the cloud, and then it processes it all together and gives you a light geometric mesh. So we're not relying on Aetos as being a millimeter precision as built, because that's not what's needed for our experience. It is a really great 360 recreation of all those points in the entire environment with enough geometric precision to get dimensions, to get measurements, and to have some context of geometry, so that as we're placing assets, there's something for that to bounce off against, right? You can't just place a tag in 3D space that correlates to an asset if there's no geometry to bounce back off of. But if it's too heavy, then you can't load it in the browser. So it's just this nice sliver of middle ground where it's the light enough mesh, but still this beautiful 8K imagery where you can get sophisticated tagging, XYZ coordinates of all your assets, and that enables all the rest of the magic to happen.
Yeah, and it's wild because these are things that we've all thought were possible, and if we think back, whatever 5-10 years ago, go further if you want, where inside of our CMMS platform, we, meaning any of us that use them in any particular way, whether it's facilities or manufacturing or all these different things, we like visual elements to show us what something looks like relative to where it's located, and getting that next level where it's interactive just is potentially a game changer. I mean, we could say it's a game changer, but you still have to use it right. You still have to have the client, the end users,
Absolutely.
the technicians and whatnot bought in and like, hey, yeah, this is what we do. This is how we do it. Do you find when you're onboarding a client and they're starting to go through the adoption phase, the initial deployment and adoption phase, do they get excited and buy in, or are they overwhelmed? And what are some of the strategies that kind of help them turn that corner?
It's another great question. The first thing that we have to get right as a company is to fully embrace the fact that we are doing enterprise delivery. And so I think a lot of software companies fail at enterprise because they're not willing to build the internal company culture and processes and execution around the full cycle change management, delivery, and adoption of what it actually takes to get an enterprise online. That's delivery, that's implementation, that's solutioning, that's consulting, that's the entire 9 yards that goes into that. And I think a lot of other software businesses fail because they sort of have this expectation the software is awesome, we're going to turn it on, and everything else is going to work itself out, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we've all seen that, and that does not work in reality, right? So, and the first thing that we had to get right as a company is to be really focused and serious about delivery, implementation, adoption, change management, governance, solutioning, and all those things that go into it. So we have a whole team dedicated to that. And before we had that team, it was not nearly as successful, I got to say. I think the other side is, where things have not gone to plan have been where, we haven't found that alignment on really what it takes to go and get to the end zone together. And, they didn't really have a full vision or understanding of where they want to be. And it was like, oh, this is a cool technology. Let's try this out. And then what? Right. And so I think for us, it's actually even been brought up to our qualification process where we need to first align on the journey that we're going to walk together, have a clear understanding of where you're trying to get. Are you serious as a client that you want to get here? And then let's kind of scrutinize the skeletons a little bit, right? Where are your PMs at today? What does your asset convention look like today? Are you organizing by system properly across all your assets, or are some of them different? Okay, are we going to solve that? How are we going to do that? If you want to create training content, does that exist today? Who's going to be in charge of building that out? We're going to support you. We're going to help be alongside you in that journey, but we need to get serious about this together. And so I think, it's a two-way street. Our best clients are ones that understand what they're trying to solve for and are willing to go invest, because software doesn't solve problems by itself. It's just a tool, right? And that tool can be the best tool in the world, but if you don't know how to use it and you don't have the time and desire to go prove it out, then it's not going to work. So it's really has to be a marriage of incentives from the very beginning and find that alignment, and then we're set up for success.
Yeah, as you're talking about this, I'm getting these ideas about like past engagements and generally how engagements like this work. And sometimes let's call it the sales cycle, right? We'll call it what it is, right? We're engaged with a client, and the less they know about where they are, about their own business, about the say, for example, root causes of the problems, to then figure out the solutions and how that fits into their existing work processes. Do they have to change or kind of make adjustments there, which we hope they don't have to. We hope they're already moving really well and are doing this so that they can kind of level up, become more mature from both a maintenance and a technological perspective. We have to, as vendors, sometimes understand this is going to take some time to educate them.
Yep.
They're not going to move this deal forward quickly. And when you do that kind of work with a potential client and you still treat them like a client, you're going to get a better outcome as well, because they have an awareness of what you've seen and you kind of go along with them on that ride. In the other scenarios, when they're actually knowing their business really, really well, understanding that they have good work processes and culture, those can move a little bit faster. But the other thought I had was it's almost like day camp. You go to day camp or whatever camp for the summer when you're a kid or whatever. I don't know, whoever, I did when I was a kid. And the first couple of days, you're kind of figuring it out. And the counselors and everybody are kind of telling you all the rules. By the end of day camp, you're a champ. You know all the stuff you should and shouldn't do and all that kind of thing. So I just had that weird kind of a thought. But how, when you go in, so let's say you've got the client, you're now going to go in and commission a facility or a number of facilities. Is it your team that goes in and does that, or does the client do it themselves? Is it both? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in general, we're going to provide the scanning team, the implementation services, and we charge for that initial implementation package, right? So we're committing to this together. Here's what it's going to look like to scan. Let's plan around downtime. Let's make sure that your people, do we need to be chaperoned? What are the safety considerations, right? So we're going to get into gear and go do that for you. Now, what we find is that the bigger and the more sophisticated clients, they want to keep things up to date. They want to refresh the scans. They want to keep things evergreen. And in those scenarios, we're enabling them to have kind of an internal SWAT team. Usually there's some kind of internal professional services organization or SES group or whatever that may be that can sort of do that maintenance of the scan on a go-forward basis, renovations, rebuilds, et cetera, so that they can easily keep things up to date. But that entire initial lift happens generally by our team. And what we do is there's the scanning process, but then there's the data and let's call it platform configuration phase, right? So we're going to get, whether it's Maximo, whether it's, name your CMMS, name your EAM, we're going to get that data either through an integration or an export of that initial data if it's a rip and replace. And we're going to figure out with our solution team, all right, is this how you want your data organized? Because this doesn't really make sense. And, we just always done it that way. Well, do you want to keep doing it that way or do you want a better way, right? So that's where we sort of have this awesome, maybe my favorite part of the deal is that post kickoff, hey, we got an opportunity here to do things better. And I know you've been doing it this way for 15 years, but here's what we've seen work. Here's what we've got 20 clients. And out of all of them, here's kind of our pattern for how to actually name systems properly and get your asset identification properly and connect procedures to the right assets and get compliance and all this kind of. So let's really begin with this end in mind, and then not just take in an import of your existing solution. Let's take a little bit of a check there and make sure that you have an idea of where you want to be. And that, okay, I want this report. Well, the way you've configured your system right now, you can't even get that report. You're not even tracking on-off time of equipment, for example, right? So how do you want to do that? How do you want to actually verify that? So that's my favorite part, is going through that solving period where you're not just taking what they've got, you're actually figuring out what's the best way to put this together. It's going to be an awesome tool for you guys for the next 20 years.
The thing you said there about the report, when we understand, and this happens very early on during discovery and all that, when we understand the report data that they're after, the outcome that they're after, it helps us help them with that configuration, because we have an understanding of where data from these fields and within this context shows up in those reports. And it's a great way to almost reverse engineer how they're doing their initial deployment and setup. And it gives you and the client a way to better understand, why are we making this adjustment in the asset hierarchy? Why are we getting rid of these two things that were part of our standardization, with much discussion and confirmation and validation that, hey, if we make this change, this actually makes sense for our business long term.
Exactly.
I'm one of those that's more interested in solutions that can, whether I'm the provider or the customer, that can meet the existing successful aspects of the business, how it already moves, and being very mindful and intentional about those tweaks. Another thing that's interesting is, with standardization, there are many ways to do that, but with more time spent on that front end before you actually deploy and during the deployment to scrutinize things, it's really valuable time spent for everyone to almost hedge your bet for long-term success. Because when people move to a system like Aetos or whatever it might be, right? You mentioned Maximo, and there's hundreds of solutions out there: CMMS, EAM, APM, blah blah blah. The thing we really want as clients is we want to find a solution that not only works, allows us to grow and improve over a long period of time, because we don't want to do this again and again and again.
Totally.
Rip and replace is one of the hardest scenarios ever, as opposed to someone that's just starting out. And if you can get these things to stick and you have some good things in place for maybe turnover on your side as a client, that's another thing I always want to understand is what you do to document internally at Aetos about a client, so that if they had an abrupt change, someone suddenly can't be in that role anymore for one reason or another, and they start to become blind to what they already have. Do you have things in place where you could say, oh, we're sorry that happened, but hey, we've got all this documentation about what your journey was, why it was, why we did this, why we did that? Do you do those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our entire delivery process, ends with effectively a closeout that walks them through the journey that we just went through to provision the solution, why we made these decisions. Their platform is rich with all of the training content around how to use the various departments. I think also, what you're also alluding to is the need for great customer success and ongoing relationships, right? So, you do your QBRs, you meet with the client on a regular basis. That's where you really need to find those red herrings and catch them before they're going to happen. And so, that's an important part of the business to really get right, and then continue to educate the client on the value, right? So if we're seeing a big drop in activity or some kind of anomaly, that needs to be a trigger for us. What's going on over there? Why were we using it this way, and now all of a sudden we're stopped? Did you realize we could do it this way? And then you find out, oh yeah, well, we found this thing. It's like, oh well, we could just do that by doing it this way. And it's like, oh great, well I didn't know that, right? So a lot of, you can sleep on that really easily. It's easy to get lazy. Oh, we signed the contract, it's good to go, delivery's done, and we're going to renew in 12 months, right? So that's just not the way the world turns. You got to stay engaged. And candidly, we're shipping so much, right? We're innovating so quickly. Gosh, we just had a release lately, and we launched, a big parts inventory and sort of on-off integration workflow to help track lifetime cycle of assets with all this reporting behind it. And we didn't do a great job of educating all of our clients that this functionality existed. And then, we get this client request of, hey, can we do this? And we're like, oh gosh, yeah, of course we can do this. Let me walk you through how we can do that. So we got to constantly stay engaged and educate them on how to use it, get the most out of their utilization.
That's what the quote unquote job really becomes when you're launching a technology. You're still a startup. Those first 5 years, maybe even longer, is really still the startup phase. And I think I'm staunch about it. I think the secret to success when you're growing a company and really want to be there for the long haul for your clients and for yourself is retention. I think retention is possibly the most critical component, because if we say the sale and the net new logos are really critical for growth, then necessarily the retention becomes even more important.
Absolutely.
Because it's your base for operating, and that base becomes the available resource for all of your clients, so that you can have these either mitigation strategies or ongoing account management strategies in place. And I think we all struggle with as providers and want to do a better job of as providers, keeping clients in the know about what's new, why it matters. And the one thing that keeps getting in the way is all of us have things to do and it piles up, and we're all in different stages of this reactive kind of state of existence. As a provider, your client is in that same situation, unfortunately, with regards to their assets and failures and things like that. So we have to make that concerted effort, that intentional effort to put systems in place. I think it's also interesting how when you're growing as a company, the way you onboard your team and how you go through that process of deciding, who's going to be a fit. There's this kind of, I don't know if it's a debate, but this idea that we need people on our teams that have the experience, that have done your job, that know maintenance and reliability, asset management, and those things. However, I think it's also possible for people that are not from those backgrounds to become proficient enough to service and support and guide clients, and they learn through osmosis. What's your opinion kind of on that and how you approach it?
Yeah, you must be in my head, because this is, I mean, the most important thing that a CEO does, right, is find the people. And so it's tough because I think this industry especially, I mean, we just had a new AE join, and within 3 weeks she had a sheet of paper, or actually 4 sheets of paper. It was all the terms that we throw around that, we just throw around like they're nothing, ERP, EAM, solution management, really, all this kind of stuff, asset naming convention. And she's like, okay, I need to start like really making sure that I've got a definition of all this stuff, and even Aetos features, right? So
Yeah.
It can be a lot to have somebody come in and like get up to speed. So, I mean, clearly the unicorn candidate is they're passionate, they're growing, they have a startup mindset of being flexible and ready to do anything, and they have the industry expertise, right?
Yeah.
That's a unicorn though, right? And you cannot, if your hiring criteria is based on meeting all those qualifications, then we wouldn't really have a business, right? So you got to give on some things. I will say this, Greg, what you cannot teach is passion. And you cannot teach, aptitude per se. You can train a lot, but having that raw engine, the desire to grow, to figure things out, to understand, in my experience, trumps experience. You can teach people how a facility works, how things operate. I mean, I didn't know nearly as much as I know today about this entire ecosystem, right? But it's that hunger, that passion to learn, that curiosity. And candidly, if you think you know it all, that's almost the worst thing that you can have, right? Because then you're not adaptable to learn. So, I would say in the past, the hires that didn't work out were probably over-indexed on experience and under-indexed on passion. And if you're willing to give somebody time in the seat and the right coaching, the right support, the right time to learn the industry, that tends to be better. Now, you still need to have some experience, right? So it's not like I'm going to hire people off the street that have never been interested in the industrial world or understand facilities at all. But I would definitely say I weigh more towards that raw DNA rather than some track record or resume. I mean, I dropped out of college, so to me, the whole credentialing system, I'm a little bit biased. I'm a sort of a self-starter, ambitious kind of guy anyways. So, to me, show me you can do it, do it. And then let's talk about the experience and what you need to go get.
Yeah. The reason I asked the question is I think, the industry as a whole tends to have its varying opinions, right? But one of them is that we want to work with people that understand us, that understand what we really do. And I do think that there's room for people that don't know so much about that, but can learn.
Yeah.
As long as they don't overstep, as long as they're willing to speak up when they don't know or understand something in a way that can instill some confidence in the client or potential client that, we're going to figure this out and understand it the way you need us to. But it's really an interesting kind of thing that I see across all these different companies. Sometimes they've got new people, and a year later they're so strong. You mentioned something else about the ones that aren't really malleable. They're maybe overconfident or
Yeah.
something like that. Um, that's not typically going to work.
Yeah,
I
you got
think
to be able to say, I don't know, let me get back to you, right? Or
yeah,
that's a great question, and let me go figure that out, right? And I think as we onboard, it's a progressive thing, right? You don't come in day one, no matter what your experience is, and here's your bag, go carry it, right? You're pulling people in, you're listening to see how did they handle that, you're asking questions, you're driving through curiosity, right? I would say if there's one trait that we select for, it's insatiable curiosity, right?
yeah,
Don't speak to the client like we have all the answers. Ask questions. Every client's going to be different. Every organization is going to have a different set of problems. And you may have think you've seen it all, but even that same problem that they have, they're looking at it differently. They might have their own novel ideas. There's always something to learn. And so, if you just put the curiosity mindset on full display and ask questions and just seek to understand and to listen, then usually you get to a much better place. And then you feel heard from the client too, because they know
oh
that
yeah,
you're not just preaching at them like, this is the way that you have to do it. This is our solution. These are our features. This is what we do. Ask questions like, what are your problems? What are you trying to solve for? How have you tried to attack that before? What worked? What didn't work? Why didn't that work?
yeah,
You see this being a fit. Okay, if we did it this way, would that work? Well, how about this? And you just have this sort of curious mindset. That's what people want. People
that's
want to
right,
be heard, and they want to understand. They want you to fit the tool to their business, right? They're not looking for a off the shelf solution that
that's
is going
right,
to be our way. They have their own processes, they have their own systems, their own way of doing things. They need a tool that benefits them. And
that's
so
right,
by being curious, we can understand how that is. And it might even be the same module, but even how we communicate it, how we send the proposal even is got to be specific to what they've said. I get
that's
onto
right.
this all the time is like, we never write the same proposal twice, right? Is that, well, they use this language. That's what goes into the proposal, right? Because we're solving for something slightly different here, because this is the flavor of how they're trying to solve for this, right? So we need to be completely unique, consistent in our technology, modular, right? So we're not building bespoke custom implementations, but we're solutioning in a unique way that is bespoke to each client because we're solving for real solutions and business problems.
That's right, and that comes from intentional curiosity,
Yeah,
asking great questions, even not so great, but lots of listening. And yeah, I mean, you're diagnosing, but you're understanding. And
exactly.
they understand their business. Some could do better, but they understand their business. And that's what this is about, their business, not yours. And when we do that, we create this kind of thing that I love is this relentless pursuit of the elusive win-win. It's possible. It's not easy, but it can be done. So, first of all, I want to thank you for giving us some insights on how this kind of started and what you're really trying to do. And we're going to be doing some more of this, but I want to put you through the paces of the fun question segment that
All
is
right.
necessary for first timers on CMMS radio. So,
Let's
you
go. Hot
ready?
seat.
All right. No wrong answers here. And it's just a little fun for us. Everybody get to know you. Number one, what is your favorite music?
Oof. Alternative rock.
All right, cool. I like it. Next one, favorite sport or hobby. And on sport, it does not have to be one that you play. It could be one you like to watch and cheer for and follow.
Tennis. And recently, I don't know if this qualifies, but chess.
Yeah, we're gonna allow that. We'll say that's a hobby. All right, here's the big one, man. This is no wrong answers. What is your philosophy, perspective, is even a thing when it comes to this concept of work-life balance?
Hmm. It's a great question. I guess to unpack my answer, what motivates me in life is impact. I don't really measure myself by, necessarily directly my happiness at any given moment. I think that's a very fleeting and maybe even short-sighted pursuit. I think I'm on this earth for a reason, and that's to make an impact, and that's from whence I derive joy. And so, distilled from that, my work is my greatest privilege. It is a blessing and an opportunity to work and to toil to create something of value in this life that makes an impact. And I apply that, to my family. I apply that to my business. I apply that to my people. Building a company is stewarding and shepherding a whole bunch of families, right? Employees are not just somebody that does a job. That's a father, that's a mother, that's a brother, that's a sister. And I've got a responsibility to those people to make sure that we are taking care of the house. And so to me, work-life balance is a very fluid thing. You have to take care of yourself in order to do good work. I do burn out. And when I do, I need to take a break and go take some time for myself to reprieve. But some of my favorite periods in life, I've worked 100 hours a week. And it didn't even feel like work because I'm doing something that I care about, that I'm passionate about, right? And so I think if you got to tell somebody to work harder, you've lost the whole moat, right? That's not really what we are about here. The work-life balance, we believe so passionately in what we're doing. We believe this matters. This is going to change the game. Not for some capital. You're never going to see me on a yacht somewhere. Like, that doesn't move my needle. What I care about is actually making a difference. It maybe sounds corny. I grew up as a missionary kid all around the world, and it's just imprinted onto my soul in terms of, I've seen some shit, growing up and seeing around the world. And when I moved to the US, I realized, oh my gosh, I could start a business and go after this. And I don't have to pay the mafia money to start a company. This is crazy. This is so cool. What an opportunity. It just doesn't work like that in a lot of places in the world. So it's a privilege. So yeah. I treat it with a great degree of responsibility, but it's fun. And I love what I do, and I don't want to do anything different.
Nice. I like it, man. Again, thank you for this time. Everybody out there, check out Aetos. You can find their website at aetosimaging.com. That's AETOS imaging, smoosh it all together, .com. You can check them out. And you can find Connor Offutt on LinkedIn if you want to connect with him and have your own conversation. And you'll see him around this year, maybe even on the circuit. And I'll have some announcements about that later with some conferences coming up. Connor, thanks for being on CMMS Radio.
Greg. Thanks for the time.
You got it. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.